Maori had faith enough in Pākehā beliefs to fight the white man's wars. The deeds of the famous Maori battalion are the stuff of legend. Less acknowledged are the heroics of New Zealand's World War II Special Forces. The 43rd Battalion, or Special Needs Forces, comprised of men usually considered unfit for service. As the war dragged on and casualties mounted, the army, desperate for new recruits, turned to New Zealand's mental institutes. David Bray's intellectually handicapped grandfather was among the first called up.
Granddad had the body of a 25-year-old but the mind of a 4-year-old. And no one in the family really ever thought that I'd see him again, to be honest.
Many thought the men doomed, but their mental instability and limited intelligence made them highly unpredictable on the battlefield.
They were good fighters, good troops. They were damn good troops.
They had no concept of fear, and they had no concept of anything really. Just had no idea.
The Special Needs Forces first saw action in North Africa, where they made an immediate impact.
The New Zealand soldiers are proving a handful, especially their defects. Yesterday, I lost 15 men when one of them ran at us with a hand grenade stuffed in his rectum.
Despite being unable to understand or follow orders, the men of the 43rd won more battles than they lost. Their leader was Captain Douglas Winchester Burns. A long-time Sunnyseat resident, Burns was an idiot savant.
Burns was mad. He was completely mad. But he did have an extraordinary memory. He could take one look at a place, an enemy base, for instance, and hours later reconstruct it exactly using just matchsticks. That made him very useful.
They were a famous division, and they fought very well indeed. Of course, their quarters were a mess, poos everywhere, some drooling, but very brave.
A lot of revisionists question the ethics of the Special Needs Forces. You know, is it right to send retards into battle?
No, I don't think he was exploited. I think it gave him a real chance to live.
Though of limited intelligence, it's unlikely that the men of the Special Needs Forces would have fallen for this particular shaggy dog story from the 1980s.
The suburbs are fighting back in the Third World War, and the mutt's on the run.
Walk down any street in the suburbs, and it's not difficult to spot the anti-dog turd secret weapon. Just a container full of water on a lawn. There's one down there.
The idea was that dogs would not defecate on lawns if they saw plastic bottles filled with water. The craze swept the nation, but sadly, the dogs kept right on shitting. As a nation, we have long been entranced by cylindrical objects, whether they be bottles, rugby balls, or even UFOs.
I was alerted by a radar there was an object on his screen.
A globular spook over Kaikoura scared the bejesus out of credible pilots, and then we all fell off our credibility poofs when this Marlborough light was captured and dragged pulsating to Dougal at 6:30 to lead the news.
The Television One Network News with Dougal Stevenson.
There's been another sighting of what may be a UFO over the Kaikoura coast. With me in the studio, a reporter Terry Olsen and soundman Lloyd.
This was also a time when 1 in 3 men were Dougal Stevenson.
It was still moving when I actually saw it.
This blob was the news for a while, although to many it just looked a lot like those glimpses of sunlight that squeeze between the fabric of your hat while sunbathing on your back at the beach, if you squint your eyes a bit. UFO mania peaked in the 1970s thanks to this man, Kiwi pilot Bruce Cathie, author of the Harmonic books. He believed that New Zealand was some sort of alien landing strip, but even his followers seemed a little confused.
By using your harmonic theory, I have, by substitution from my equation, reduced the physical world to the following relative equation. And I'm afraid that It's not very clear in that bit there.
Remarkably, UFO hysteria coincided with the arrival of the Sideburn.
I happened to look up and I saw two of the very bright lights.
It looked like a bright object in the sky. I was coming from that direction there.
I couldn't actually tell you the shape.
Well, I always have been rather sceptical about this type of thing.
The first one was seen at Waipuka around the 30th of October 1969 by 600 sheep, a guard dog, and a guard, and all were affected by it.
There was even a sighting from the back of a Gisborne shaggin' wagon.
You got to sort of remember that we got a Viva estate and we were sort of lying down with our heads to the back window looking up.
But it wasn't just the young and possibly bedraggled who saw these sources. Meet dairying duck Eileen Morland, who jabbered away all day to Louise Joyce, gypsy detective of the NZBC.
I stopped again, and these lights sort of come down very quickly towards the ground. Well, I didn't wait. I suddenly decided I'd better not be here, and I off. I couldn't imagine what it was. Actually, I suppose it was the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen. It was enormous. They were dressed in silver foil suits.
Before the advent of Winston Peters, Tauranga pensioners thronged to local halls to hear of these saviours from the stars. They even offered a fried food freebie for any extraterrestrial landing in the electorate.
I don't blame these people for not landing, especially if they go over Vietnam or Northern Ireland.
It'd be very unwise to land in a city because you would have a terrific job to prove that you were from outer space.
Just like Daleks and Coronation Street, UFOs too were scarier and far more credible in black and white.
So it goes on. Lyndon B. Johnson, former United States President, said at a press conference, if we knew who constructed flying saucers, we would gladly order a few squadrons. He's not suggesting they didn't exist. He's only wishing he knew who constructed them. These men lead the United States. They're not mugs. They are not cranks either. Any more than I believe anybody here today is a crank.
And appealingly, there were claims from smokers at the time that aliens were already among us, incarnate in Kiwi form.
Has this happened?
Oh, definitely. Wouldn't surprise me at all if people actually from outer space were at this meeting here today, the conference.
What do these people look like when you've seen them?
Completely humanoid, same as you and I are.
But when pushed for the answer from one suspected alien amongst us, more humble origins were proffered, perhaps to throw the reporter off the scent.
People here at the conference have suggested that you're not an Earthman. Can you tell me where you are from?
Whangarei.